The Testament of Magdalen Blair by Aleister Crowley, 1929. Narrated by LanternLeaf Audio, 2025. Magdalen Blair was of Scottish birth. In her veins there mingled the blood of the old Highland seers and that of the Covenanters who had wrestled with Jehovah in the naked moors. In her earliest youth, she had shown signs of that peculiar gift which is called second sight. She had known things about people which nobody could possibly have known. At first, she had been frightened by this strange faculty, and her family, being strict Presbyterians, had treated her as possessed of the devil. But Magdalen was not to be daunted. She had something of the rebel in her nature. She broke away from her home and went to Edinburgh. There, by means of small gifts of prophecy, she managed to earn a living, and at the same time to educate herself. She had a sharp, keen intelligence and a memory that never forgot. In the course of her studies, she came across certain books dealing with the subject of psychology. She read of telepathy, hypnotism, and all that strange borderland between mind and matter. She recognized at once that she had found the explanation of her own powers. What had seemed supernatural to her family was, after all, only natural. Magdalen began to practice upon her friends. She found that by fixing her attention upon a person, she could penetrate into that person's mind, could follow the thoughts and even influence them. The discovery intoxicated her. She felt herself to be a queen among men. It was at this time that she met Professor Blair. He was a man of science, a physician of no mean repute, who had specialized in nervous diseases. He was much older than she was, and at first treated her with a certain contempt. But when he saw the remarkable powers she possessed, he changed his tone. He took her under his care, taught her many things, and finally married her. The marriage was not altogether happy. Blair was a hard man, absorbed in his work, and somewhat callous to the feelings of others. Magdalen, with her hypersensitive nature, suffered much from his indifference. She craved for sympathy, for love, for tenderness, but she got none of these things. On the other hand, Blair encouraged her to develop her powers to the utmost. He made her practice telepathy with him every day. He subjected her to experiments, some of which were cruel and exhausting. But Magdalen endured them because she felt that in this way she was fulfilling her destiny. As time went on, her powers increased. She could now not only read the thoughts of people, but could penetrate into the innermost recesses of their minds, could see the secret desires and fears that lurked there. She could even project her own personality into another person, and for the time being, live that other person's life. It was a terrible gift, and sometimes she hated it, for she saw too much. She saw the meanness, the cruelty, the lust, the cowardice that men hid from the world. She saw the naked soul, stripped of all its disguises, and the sight sickened her. One day, Blair fell ill. It was a nervous disease, obscure and complicated. He himself could not diagnose it. He became restless, irritable, and suspicious. He accused Magdalen of deceiving him, of plotting against him. She bore his reproaches patiently, but in her heart she was miserable. At last the idea came to her that she might cure him by the exercise of her powers. If she could penetrate into his mind, she might discover the cause of his illness and perhaps remove it. She determined to make the attempt. She chose a time when he was asleep. She sat by his bedside and concentrated her whole attention upon him. Slowly, gradually, she felt herself slipping into his mind. It was like descending into a dark cavern. She groped her way cautiously, feeling her path as she went. At first, she encountered nothing but confusion, a chaos of disconnected thoughts and images. Then, little by little, the confusion cleared, and she found herself in a strange world, the world of Blair's subconscious mind. She found herself in a world of horror. She saw hideous shapes, monstrous figures, grotesque and terrifying. She heard cries of anguish, shrieks of fear, laughter that froze her blood. She saw Blair himself, not as he appeared in the outer world, but as he really was, a cruel, selfish, cowardly soul, eaten up with fear and hatred. Magdalen shuddered. She would have drawn back, but she felt herself held as by an irresistible force. She was dragged deeper and deeper into this inferno. She saw scenes of vice and cruelty, acts of meanness and treachery, deeds of shame and horror. And through it all, she saw Blair, always Blair, the central figure of the tragedy. She realized now that his illness was due to his own nature. He was being devoured by his own vices. His soul was rotting within him, and the corruption was spreading to his body. Magdalen tried to help him. She strove to purify his mind, to banish the evil thoughts, to implant better ones. But it was in vain. The evil was too deeply rooted. She could not fight against it. She was powerless. At last, exhausted and terrified, she tore herself away and returned to her own body. She fainted, and when she came to herself, she was lying on the floor, with Blair bending over her, cursing her for her folly. But she did not tell him what she had seen. She was afraid. She knew now that he hated her, that he suspected her, that he would kill her if he could. She kept silence and endured. From that time onward, her life was a torment. Blair treated her with increasing brutality. He insulted her, struck her, tortured her in body and soul. She bore it all, hoping against hope that someday she might win him back, that she might save him from himself. But her hope was vain. He sank lower and lower. His disease increased upon him. He became a wreck of a man, hideous to look upon, horrible to live with. At last the end came. He was seized with a violent fit and fell senseless. Magdalen summoned the doctors, but they could do nothing. They shook their heads and said that the case was hopeless. Then Magdalen made a desperate resolve. She would once more penetrate into his mind, and this time she would not come back until she had conquered. She sat by his bedside and fixed her eyes upon his face. Slowly, gradually, she slipped into his mind. Again she found herself in that world of horror, but this time she was not afraid. She was determined to fight to the last. She confronted the hideous shapes, the monstrous figures, and drove them back. She met Blair himself, the embodiment of all that was vile and loathsome, and grappled with him. It was a terrible struggle. The whole world seemed to rock and reel. She felt herself torn and battered, bruised and bleeding. But she fought on, never giving way, never yielding an inch. She poured out all her strength, all her will, all her soul into the conflict. At last she conquered. She saw Blair fall, writhing and cursing, into the abyss. She saw the hideous shapes vanish, the monstrous figures melt away. She saw the whole world of horror crumble and dissolve. She felt a great peace. She knew that she had won. She had saved Blair's soul. She sank down, exhausted but triumphant, and all grew dark about her. When she awoke, she was lying on the bed beside Blair's body. He was dead. For a long time Magdalen lay motionless, staring at the dead man beside her. Then slowly the truth began to dawn upon her. She had not saved him. She had killed him. In conquering his soul, she had destroyed his body. She had fought with the disease, and in overthrowing it, she had overthrown the man himself. A great horror seized her. She sprang from the bed and stood trembling, her hands pressed to her temples. What had she done? She had murdered her husband, the man she had loved, the man she had striven to save. The thought drove her almost mad. She fled from the room, from the house, from the world. She wandered hither and thither, a broken, haunted woman, shunned by all, despised by all, feared by all. She became a wanderer on the face of the earth, Men looked at her and turned away. Women shuddered and drew their children closer to them. Dogs barked at her. Children hooted at her. She was an outcast, a pariah, a thing accursed. Yet through it all, she clung to one thought. She had done her duty. She had fought to the last, and she had conquered. She had saved Blair's soul, even though she had destroyed his body. And in that thought, she found a kind of comfort. She wandered on, alone and friendless, but with a strange light in her eyes and a strange smile on her lips. She had passed through hell, and she had come out victorious. She was no longer Magdalen Blair, the poor, weak woman, the victim of a cruel and selfish man. She was Magdalen Blair, the saviour of a soul, the conqueror of evil. So she wandered on until at last she disappeared and was seen no more. Some said she had gone mad and died in a madhouse. Others said she had wandered into the desert and perished of thirst. But there were some who whispered that she had been taken up into heaven, like Elijah of old, in a chariot of fire. Be that as it may, her name lived on, and men spoke with awe of the Testament of Magdalen Blair, narrated by LanternLeaf Audio.